Have you ever felt the sting of silence cut deeper than any word could? That moment when someone you care about, someone you've given your time, your thoughts, maybe even your heart to, suddenly pulls back and leaves you with nothing but unanswered questions and an empty space. It's not just quiet, it's a silence that screams. A silence that keeps you awake at night, wondering what you did wrong, what changed, and why. Being ignored can feel like you've been erased, like your presence no longer matters, like your very existence is invisible. And in those moments, the weight of that silence can be crushing. But let me tell you something powerful. If you are feeling this, you are not alone. Every person who has ever loved, cared, or hoped has felt this same invisible punch to the chest. It hurts because it matters. It hurts because deep down, the human heart is wired for connection. Your brain literally craves acknowledgement. When someone looks at you, speaks to you, recognizes you, it lights up the same reward centers as food or safety. And when you are ignored, when that connection is cut off, it feels like danger. That's why your chest tightens, why your thoughts spiral, why silence feels like rejection. But here's the truth you need to hear. Silence does not mean you are unworthy. Silence does not mean you are forgettable. Silence does not erase your beauty, your value, or your power. When a man ignores you, it can feel like the end of your confidence, but in reality, it is the beginning of your clarity. Because silence is never empty. It always carries meaning. And if you can stand still long enough, if you can hold your ground instead of running after answers, you will begin to see that his silence says far more about him than it ever says about you. Right now, your mind wants to chase. It wants to fill the gap with explanations, with desperate actions, with self-blame. But what if instead of running toward his silence, you turn toward yourself? What if you understood that silence is not a wall, it is a mirror? It reflects back not your failures, but your strength. It shows you exactly where you've been giving away too much of your energy, where you've been placing your worth in the hands of someone who doesn't know how to hold it. The pain of being ignored is real, but it is also an invitation to rise, to stop measuring yourself by someone else's attention, and to reclaim your voice, your energy, your presence, because the moment you stop begging for recognition is the moment you start building unshakable confidence. And that confidence will do more for your life, your happiness, and your future than any single man's silence ever could. Stay with me, because what comes next is not just an explanation, it is transformation. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever felt that your heart was silenced, this journey will teach you not just why it happened, but how to use it as fuel. By the end, you will no longer see silence as rejection. You will see it as a hidden gift. You will see it as the starting point of your rise. And that shift, that awakening will change everything. Silence is never neutral. Absence itself is a message, and often it speaks louder than words ever could. When someone pulls back, when their voice disappears and their presence fades, the emptiness they leave behind does something powerful. It forces you to listen, not to them, but to yourself. In that space, your heart begins to ask questions it never asked before. Why do I feel unworthy without their attention? Why does their absence feel like proof that I'm not enough? And if you're brave enough to sit with those questions, you will discover that what hurts is not only the silence, but the way it triggers something much deeper inside you. Science has shown that emotional pain and physical pain are processed in the same parts of the brain. That's why being ignored feels like a wound you can't see, but you can absolutely feel. It's why your chest tightens, your stomach turns, and your thoughts can't stop replaying the moment you notice the distance. You are not imagining it. Your body is reacting as if it's in danger. Because to the human brain, being left out, being unseen, being ignored, these are primal threats. For thousands of years, belonging was survival. To be excluded meant vulnerability, and that ancient wiring still lives in you. That is why his silence burns so deeply. It isn't just him. It's the echo of your biology. But here lies the turning point. Once you understand that this reaction is natural, you can stop letting it control you. His silence is not proof of your failure. It is not evidence that you are unlovable. It is simply a trigger that reveals how deeply you desire connection, how deeply you are wired to be acknowledged. And the moment you see this, the moment you realize that the pain comes from within you, not from him, you reclaim power. Because then you no longer chase his voice to heal you. You look inward, where the true healing begins. Absence then becomes information, It tells you how much you've been relying on someone else's presence to validate your own. It shows you the places in your life where you've given away too much power, too much attention, too much of your soul. That realization is painful, but it is also liberating. Because when you see how much of your worth has been tied to someone else's approval, you also see the key to your freedom. You do not need to beg for presence. You do not need to fight for acknowledgement. The silence itself has revealed what you must do. Break the chain that ties your value to another person's response. Think about this. If absence can make you feel small, then choosing to stop depending on it can make you feel limitless. When you decide that someone else's silence is no longer the judge of your worth, you rise above the old patterns that kept you chasing, pleading, and doubting. You begin to step into a different kind of power, one built on inner strength, on clarity, on the unshakable truth that you are already enough. The silence that once felt like rejection now becomes a teacher. It is there to wake you up, to remind you that no one else can complete you, to show you that your deepest strength is discovered not in noise, not in validation, but in the quiet moments when you choose yourself. And once you choose yourself, no absence, no silence, no distance will ever have the power to break you again. When a man ignores you, it can feel like the universe itself is pointing a finger at you, whispering that you are not enough, but that whisper is a lie. His silence is not the measurement of your worth. It is the reflection of his state, his choices, his limitations. Silence is a mirror, and what it reflects is not your value, but his capacity. Too often we confuse the two. We assume that if someone does not acknowledge us, we must be unworthy of acknowledgement. But the truth is far simpler and far more freeing. The way someone treats you reveals who they are, not who you are. Think about it. A diamond does not lose its brilliance because someone turns away from it. The sun does not stop shining because someone closes their eyes. Your value does not shrink because someone refuses to see it. His silence says nothing about your light. It says everything about whether he has the vision to recognize it. And if he chooses blindness, that is not your burden. That is his. The danger comes when you start to internalize that silence, when you let it dig into your heart and rewrite the story of who you are. This is where the real battle begins, not against him, but against the voice inside you that says, maybe he's right. Maybe I'm not enough. That voice is the enemy. That voice is the thief. Because the moment you believe it, you start to shrink. You start to hold back your words, your beauty, your fire, waiting for someone else to validate what was already inside you. But here's the breakthrough. The mirror of silence is also an opportunity. It forces you to ask yourself, am I living for their approval or am I living for my own truth? And when you realize that your value is unshaken, no matter who sees it, you begin to reclaim your strength. You stop dancing for attention. You stop begging for scraps of recognition. You start standing tall, radiating confidence from the inside out with or without applause. Silence teaches resilience. It teaches you to see yourself clearly when others cannot. It teaches you to stand in the storm and declare, I am still here. I am still whole. I am still powerful. That is the transformation waiting for you in the quiet. To look into the mirror of someone else's absence and see not emptiness, but the outline of your own strength. And when you reach that place, something shifts forever. You no longer chase people who run. You no longer beg for attention that should be freely given. You no longer hand your worth to those who don't know how to hold it. You walk forward with dignity, with clarity, with the unshakable knowing that silence does not define you. You define you. The man who ignores you has revealed something, not about you, but about himself. His silence is his mirror. Your response is yours. And if you choose strength, if you choose self-worth, then his silence becomes powerless. Because no one, not even the one who turns away, can diminish a soul that has learned to see its own light. Sometimes silence is not just avoidance. Sometimes it is a test, a quiet calculation of how much you will tolerate, how far you will bend, how deeply you will chase before you finally say enough. When a man ignores you, it can be more than indifference. It can be an attempt to measure your boundaries, to see if you will collapse under the weight of his absence, or if you will rise and hold your ground. And in that test lies the truth about both him and you. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are lines that teach others how to treat you. They are the invisible markers of self-respect. If you do not set them, someone else will. If you do not protect them, someone else will trample them. Silence can become a weapon in this battle. It can be used to manipulate, to make you question yourself, to pull you into a cycle where you are always chasing, always proving, always giving more while receiving less. And if you are not awake, you can fall into the trap of believing that the only way to win love is to accept less than you deserve. But you were not created to beg. You were not born to shrink. You were not meant to hand your dignity to anyone who tests it. The test of silence is not meant to break you. It is meant to awaken you. Because every time you choose to respect your own boundaries, every time you refuse to bend for someone who withholds presence as a form of control, you strengthen the foundation of your worth. You rise taller. You become unshakable. When a man ignores you to see how much you will endure, he reveals his need for power over connection. But when you respond by standing firm, by refusing to chase, by honoring your own space, you send a message louder than any words. I will not be measured by your silence. I will be defined by my strength. That is the declaration that transforms silence from a prison into a stage. It takes courage to hold your boundary in the face of rejection. It takes strength to say, if you will not respect me, then I will respect myself enough to walk away. That is not weakness. That is power. Because the truth is, real love does not need to test you to prove itself. Real love does not disappear to see if you will beg it to return. Real love shows up, speaks honestly, and chooses you freely. Anything less is not worthy of your energy. And so the silence becomes a gift in disguise. It reveals who sees your worth and who only seeks control. It shows you who is ready to love and who is only ready to test. It draws the line between those who deserve access to your heart and those who do not. When you honor that line, when you protect your boundaries with unwavering strength, you create space for real connection to enter. The man who ignores you may think he is holding power, but the truth is this: the power is always yours. It lives in your decision to choose self-respect over desperation. It lives in your courage to walk away from manipulation and toward freedom. And once you see that, silence loses its grip. Because nothing is stronger than a soul that knows its own worth and refuses to let anyone test it away. There are times when silence is not a test of your boundaries, but a reflection of fear. Many men are taught from an early age that vulnerability is weakness, that showing emotion is dangerous, that admitting pain makes them less. So when they are faced with feelings too heavy to carry or emotions too raw to express, they retreat. They hide behind silence because silence feels safer than truth. Ignoring becomes their shield, not because you are unworthy of words, but because they are unprepared to speak them. This is where confusion often arises. You may think his silence means rejection, indifference, or lack of love. But sometimes it is avoidance, a desperate attempt to escape emotions he cannot handle. He may not know how to face his own insecurities, his own fears, his own shadows, so he disappears into the quiet. And in that disappearance, you are left holding the weight of questions that were never yours to carry. Understanding this does not mean excusing it. It does not mean you should tolerate neglect or accept a relationship where communication is absent. But it does give you perspective. His silence is not always about your flaws. It may be about his inability to face his own. That knowledge is power because it allows you to separate his behavior from your value. It helps you see that what he withholds is not proof of your failure. It is evidence of his fear. When you grasp this, you stop personalizing his retreat. You stop chasing explanations from someone who is not ready to give them. You start realizing that sometimes silence says, I cannot face myself, not you are not worth facing. And that distinction can set you free. Because once you know the silence is not about you, you can stop letting it define you. This is where self-respect becomes vital. You can hold compassion for someone's struggle without sacrificing your own needs. You can acknowledge that silence may come from fear without accepting it as your prison. You can say, I understand you may be struggling, but I will not abandon myself while you hide. That balance is strength. That balance is clarity. Because if you are not careful, empathy can turn into self-destruction. You can pour yourself into trying to heal someone who refuses to open, and in the process, you lose yourself. That is not love. Love does not demand that you shrink to fit someone's silence. Love requires mutual courage, the courage to be seen, to be heard, to be vulnerable. If only one person carries that weight, it is not love, it is imbalance. So when you are faced with silence born from fear, choose wisely. Do not chase it, do not fix it, do not break yourself to feel it. Instead, stand firm in your worth. Offer understanding, but not at the cost of your dignity. Show compassion, but not at the expense of your boundaries. If he is ready to rise, he will. If he is not, then his silence becomes his cage, not yours. And this is where your transformation deepens. You realize that being ignored does not mean you are unloved. It often means the other person has not yet learned how to love themselves enough to love you fully. That truth liberates you because you were never meant to carry someone else's fear as your own. You were meant to walk in your power, knowing that silence cannot diminish a heart that refuses to abandon itself. There are moments when his silence has nothing to do with you at all. Sometimes it is not a strategy, not a rejection, not even avoidance. It is a reflection of battles you cannot see. A man may withdraw not because you lack value, but because he is carrying weight too heavy to share. Stress, shame, failure, self-doubt. These shadows can drive him inward, away from everyone, including you. And when you are left on the outside of that silence, it is easy to mistake his distance as your fault. But often, it is not about you. It is about the storm raging inside him. This truth can be difficult to accept because silence always feels personal. It feels like an arrow aimed at your heart. Yet sometimes silence is not an attack. It is a defense. A man who feels unworthy may retreat so you never see his weakness. A man drowning in pressure may disappear so you never witness his cracks. A man facing his own shame may hide, not because you do not matter, but because you matter too much and he cannot bear to let you see him broken. His silence then is not a rejection of you, but a wall against his own reflection. Knowing this changes the way you see the moment, but it does not mean you must wait in endless patience or sacrifice yourself in the name of understanding. His hidden struggles do not erase your need for respect, for presence, for love that shows up. You can acknowledge his pain without abandoning your own. You can hold compassion without losing your boundaries. The choice is not between empathy and self-worth. The choice is to carry both, because love built on denial is not love at all. If you silence your needs so his silence can continue, you do not build connection, you build resentment. You cannot heal someone by breaking yourself. You cannot carry both your weight and theirs without eventually collapsing. And collapse is not love. Love is strength meeting strength. Love is courage meeting courage. Anything less becomes imbalance disguised as devotion. So if his silence comes from hidden struggles, let it reveal to you not a reason to chase, but a reason to reflect. Ask yourself, am I making space for his growth without losing myself in the process? Am I honoring his humanity while still protecting my own dignity? Am I showing compassion without stepping into sacrifice? These questions keep you grounded. They keep you whole. Because sometimes the kindest act you can offer is not to fix, not to beg, not to chase, but to stand firm in your truth and let him face his own shadows. If he chooses to rise, he will. If he does not, then you know his silence was never about your worth, but about his decision to remain in the comfort of his walls. And you cannot climb those walls for him. When you understand this, silence transforms once again. It stops being a wound you carry and becomes a signal you interpret. It teaches you discernment. It teaches you balance. It teaches you the art of compassion without surrender. And in that wisdom, you grow unshakable. You realize that no matter what storm he is fighting, you do not have to drown in it. You can stand on the shore, strong, grounded, and whole, knowing that his silence is his battle. But your worth is eternally your own. The greatest danger of silence is not always the silence itself, but what it awakens inside your mind. When someone ignores you, your thoughts can become louder than their absence. You start replaying every word you said, every look you gave, every moment you shared, searching for evidence that explains the distance. And because the brain craves certainty, it invents stories when answers are missing. Those stories rarely empower you. They whisper blame, shame, and doubt until you no longer see reality. You only see yourself through the lens of rejection. This is the trap of overthinking. Silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty fuels anxiety. Studies show that the human mind struggles more with not knowing than it does with bad news. That is why being ignored can feel more painful than being openly rejected. At least rejection gives closure. Silence leaves you spinning in endless questions, feeding on possibilities that drain your energy and weaken your spirit. But you must recognize this spiral for what it is, a prison built by your own thoughts. A man's silence may last for days, but your mind can extend it into months, even years, if you allow it to loop unchecked. The pain becomes less about him and more about the endless dialogue you have with yourself. You replay, you imagine, you analyze until your peace is shattered by illusions. That is the real danger, not his silence, but your surrender to the stories it makes you tell. Freedom begins the moment you interrupt that cycle. Instead of asking, what did I do wrong? Ask, why am I letting this question steal my power? Instead of replaying the silence, choose to reframe it. See it not as a reflection of your inadequacy, but as a reminder to reclaim your focus. The thoughts that drag you into despair are not truth, they are habits, and habits can be broken. Start with your breath. When the spiral begins, when the silence starts shouting in your mind, pause. Breathe deeply, slowly, with intention. Anchor yourself in the present moment. This simple act reminds your body that you are safe, that the silence outside does not control the strength within. Then write. Take the storm from your head and pour it onto paper. Journaling turns chaos into clarity. When your fears are written down, they lose their power to haunt you in the dark corners of your mind. Every time you redirect your focus from him to you weaken the grip of overthinking. Every time you choose to breathe, to write, to ground yourself, you teach your brain a new truth. Silence is not danger. Silence is space. Space to grow, space to heal, space to rediscover the power you once thought was lost. The man who ignores you can never hurt you as much as your own unchecked thoughts can. And once you see that, you unlock a freedom few ever find. You learn that peace is not given by others. It is created within you. You learn that no silence has the power to destroy you unless you feed it with your own energy. And the moment you stop feeding it, the moment you reclaim your focus, you break free from the prison of overthinking. In that freedom, you rise stronger, calmer, and more in control than ever before. When you break free from the grip of overthinking, you begin to see something extraordinary. The silence that once consumed you becomes space. Space you can now fill with yourself. The energy you once poured into chasing answers can be redirected into building strength, passion, and clarity. Every ounce of attention you waste on someone else's absence is attention stolen from your own growth. And the moment you decide to reclaim that energy, you ignite transformation. Attention is power. Where you place it determines who you become. If you place it on silence, you shrink. If you place it on yourself, you expand. Think about how much time, how much emotion, how many sleepless nights you've already given to wondering why he pulled away. Imagine what would happen if that same intensity were turned inward, not into self-blame, but into self-creation. The version of you that you dream of becoming is not waiting for his reply. She is waiting for your focus. Reclaiming your energy does not mean pretending you don't care. It means refusing to hand over your life force to someone else's decisions. It means channeling that fire into things that actually lift you higher. When you move your body, you release the weight of frustration. When you learn, you expand beyond the limits silence tries to place on you. When you chase your goals, you remind yourself that your future cannot be built in someone else's shadow. Every step you take toward yourself weakens the hold of his absence. This shift is not just emotional, it is magnetic. People are drawn to energy that is whole, vibrant, and grounded in self-worth. When you stop chasing silence and start living fully, your presence becomes undeniable. You no longer beg for acknowledgement because you carry your own certainty. That kind of energy is impossible to ignore, and even if he never returns, the strength you gain makes his silence irrelevant. Ask yourself, what could you create if you stopped feeding the void and started fueling your vision? What body could you build? What dream could you pursue? What life could you design if you no longer wasted your days waiting for words that never come? The silence that once felt like a cage becomes the very spark that drives you toward freedom. And here's the truth most people never realize. Silence can either shrink you or shape you. If you let it, it will bury you in doubt. But if you choose, it will push you into the fire of growth. It all depends on where you place your energy. You are not powerless. You are not broken. You are in possession of the most powerful resource you will ever have, your focus. So guard it, protect it, direct it. Let silence fuel your rise instead of your despair. because the man who ignores you has taken nothing from you. The only thing that can be taken is what you give away. And once you stop giving your energy to absence and start giving it to yourself, you become unstoppable. You become untouchable. You become the kind of person who no silence can ever defeat again. The more you reclaim your energy, the more you begin to understand a universal truth. People value what they cannot easily take for granted. Human nature is wired to pursue what feels scarce and to dismiss what feels endlessly available. This is not about playing games. It is about understanding the law of value. When you hand over your attention freely, when you chase someone who ignores you, you teach them that your presence requires no effort. And what requires no effort is rarely cherished. This is why withdrawing your energy is not punishment. It is alignment. It's a natural rebalancing of respect. When you stop chasing, you shift the dynamic completely. The silence that once made you feel powerless now becomes your power. Because instead of proving your worth, you embody it. You show, without a single word, that you will not lower your value to earn someone else's presence. Attraction itself is rooted in value. Psychology proves that when something is scarce, when it is not easily available, it becomes more desirable. This does not mean you should withhold yourself out of fear. It means you must live in such a way that your energy, your time, your presence are precious resources, not discounts given to anyone who fails to appreciate them. The person who ignores you must come to see that your absence is felt more deeply than your constant availability ever was. But the true power of this shift is not in whether he notices, it is in how you transform. Because when you stop pouring your life into chasing, you begin pouring it into creating. You elevate yourself. You rise in confidence, in purpose, in strength. You become someone whose worth is undeniable, regardless of who acknowledges it. And the world always responds to that kind of energy. Opportunities open. People are drawn to you. Life begins to mirror the value you finally claim for yourself. The silence that once made you doubt now becomes proof of your strength. Because if you can resist the pull to beg, to explain, to chase, you step into a version of yourself that no rejection can diminish. You discover that real power is quiet, steady, unshakable. It is the kind of power that commands respect without asking for it. And once you taste that, you will never return to the version of yourself that pleaded for recognition. This is the lesson hidden in being ignored. You cannot control how others see you, but you can control how you see yourself. You can decide whether to give away your value or to guard it like the treasure it is. And when you choose the latter, when you treat your energy as sacred, you elevate your entire life. The man who ignores you may never realize what he lost, but you will realize what you gained, the unbreakable strength of knowing your value. Because the law of value is simple. When you treat yourself as priceless, the world has no choice but to respond in kind. And in that truth, silence loses all power. It no longer defines you, it refines you. It makes you rise into the rare, radiant version of yourself that no one can ever take for granted again. When someone ignores you, the urge to react can feel overwhelming. You want to demand answers, to confront the silence, to force clarity, but reaction is often the trap. It is the moment you hand over your power in exchange for a fleeting sense of control. Begging, lashing out, or chasing may feel like action, but in truth, they weaken your position. They show that your emotions are dictated by someone else's choices, and the more you react, the more you confirm that their silence has power over you. Strength in moments like these is found not in noise, but in restraint. It is the calm decision to respond with dignity instead of desperation. It is the discipline to stand still when everything in you wants to run. This does not mean you suppress your feelings. It means you master them. You learn to breathe through the storm, to pause before you act, to ask yourself, does this action honor my worth or does it betray it? That single pause can be the difference between shrinking into the silence or rising above it. Psychology teaches us that self-control is one of the greatest indicators of long-term success in every area of life. The ability to regulate your emotions, to choose strength over impulse is the foundation of confidence. And when you are ignored, this becomes your battlefield. You are not fighting him. You are fighting the part of yourself that wants to hand over your power. If you can win that battle, you win something far greater than his attention. You win self-mastery. Silence is a test, not just of his character, but of yours. Will you let absence dictate your actions, Or will you hold your ground with unshakable calm? When you refuse to react from desperation, you send a clear message not to him but to yourself. You prove that your dignity is stronger than your doubt. You prove that your worth is not up for negotiation. You prove that your peace cannot be stolen by someone else's choices. And something remarkable happens when you choose strength over reaction. The silence that once made you feel powerless now becomes powerless itself. Because if you do not chase, if you do not beg, if you do not crumble, his silence has no victory. You stand tall, unbroken, untouchable. That is real power. That is the kind of strength that cannot be ignored no matter how hard someone tries. It is not always easy. Your heart will ache. Your mind will scream. Every instinct will tell you to do something, to force a response, to end the uncertainty. But greatness is forged in these moments of discipline. Strength is built in the space between impulse and action. And every time you choose restraint, you build a foundation of confidence so solid that no silence can shake it. Remember this, you do not prove your value by reacting to absence. You prove your value by standing so firm in your worth that no absence can move you. That is how you transform silence into strength. That is how you turn pain into power. And once you learn this, no man, no moment, no silence will ever control you again. There comes a moment when you realize that silence is not rejection, it is revelation. It reveals who truly values you and who does not. It strips away illusions, forcing you to see with clear eyes what words often try to disguise. When a man ignores you, he is not just withholding attention, he is showing you where you stand in his priorities. And while that truth may sting, it is also the gift you need to step into your own clarity. Because life is too short to beg for what should flow freely. Affection should not be coerced. Respect should not be negotiated. Love should not be one-sided labor. Someone chooses to ignore you, they are showing you how they handle your worth. And you must decide whether you will accept that treatment or demand something higher by walking away from anything less. Psychology tells us that people reveal their true selves not in moments of comfort, but in moments of choice. His choice to ignore you speaks volumes about his respect, his maturity, and his ability to meet you with the consistency you deserve. You do not need to decode mixed signals. You do not need to explain away silence with excuses. Ignoring is communication. It communicates either disinterest, avoidance, or weakness. And none of those align with the love and respect you are worthy of receiving. The danger is in clinging to potential. You tell yourself that maybe he is busy, maybe he is confused, maybe things will change. But the more you hold on to maybe, the more you delay the reality of no. And the longer you delay, the deeper you sink into cycles of waiting, hoping, and self-doubt. The truth is, silence should never feel like love. Love shows up. Love reaches out. Love makes itself known. If you have to guess, if you have to beg, if you have to chase, then what you are fighting for is not love. It is an illusion. This is where your power lies, in the courage to face truth without flinching, to look at silence and say, I see what this means and I will not lower myself to fit into the space someone else refuses to hold for me. That choice is liberation. It frees you from endless waiting. It frees you from doubting your worth. It frees you from pouring your energy into someone who has already made their decision through their inaction. And in that freedom, you rise. You stop tying your value to his responses. You stop measuring your worth by how much attention he gives. You reclaim the authority over your own heart. And once you do, you become unstoppable. Because no silence, no rejection, no absence can break a woman who has decided to stand firm in her truth. Let the silence reveal what it must. Let it strip away the illusions. Let it clear the path so you can walk forward with strength. Because the man who ignores you has done one thing without even realizing it. He has handed you the gift of clarity. And with clarity, you no longer need to chase. You no longer need to question. You are free to choose yourself. And that is the most powerful choice you will ever make. When you no longer fear silence, you begin to see how powerful your presence truly is. You start to understand that your value is not proven by how someone responds to you, but by how you respond to yourself. The moment you stop chasing, begging, or doubting, you shift the entire balance of power. not because you are trying to manipulate, but because you finally recognize that you are already enough. And when you believe that deeply, you radiate a strength that no one can overlook. Human psychology is clear. People are drawn to those who project self-respect. Confidence creates gravity. It pulls others in without effort. When you anchor yourself in your worth, you create an energy that demands recognition, whether someone chooses to give it or not. You no longer crumble in the face of rejection because rejection cannot erase what is already true. And the truth is this: you are worthy whether he sees it or not. This realization changes everything. It changes how you walk into a room. It changes how you carry yourself in silence. It changes how you make decisions when someone fails to show up. Because instead of asking, why doesn't he want me? You start asking, why would I give my heart to someone who cannot recognize its value? That one question flips the script. It takes you from a place of powerlessness into a place of authority. You are no longer the one waiting to be chosen. You are the one doing the choosing. The more you embrace this, the more your life expands. Opportunities that were invisible before begin to reveal themselves because your energy is no longer trapped in chasing someone who will not meet you halfway. You start attracting people who see you, who respect you, who value you without hesitation. This is not magic. It is the natural result of shifting your focus inward. When you decide that you are enough, your world begins to reflect that decision back to you. And here is the deeper truth. Sometimes silence is not about you at all. Sometimes it is about him, his fears, his distractions, his inability to love in the way you deserve. But you cannot heal that for him. You cannot beg him into becoming ready. You cannot force him into clarity. The more you try, the more you exhaust yourself. And the exhaustion only blinds you to the beauty of what you could be experiencing elsewhere. Peace, joy, respect, and genuine love. That is why your strength lies in detachment, not bitterness. Detachment does not mean you do not care. It means you refuse to chain your worth to another person's ability to see it. It means you acknowledge their choice without letting it dismantle your own. It means you rise above the noise and choose to align yourself with what honors your spirit. And once you choose this, you stop fearing being ignored because you know that your life, your future, and your joy are too important to be wasted on silence. You know that love should lift you, not leave you guessing. You know that your heart deserves someone who meets it fully. And until that person comes, you will not lower yourself to fill the gap. You will stand radiant and unshakable because you have finally learned that being ignored is not the end. It is the beginning of your freedom. The moment you stop tying your value to someone else's response, you unlock a new level of freedom. You realize that attention is not love and silence is not a reflection of your worth. What matters is not whether someone notices you, but whether you choose to notice yourself. The truth is, many people spend years trying to earn recognition from those who were never capable of giving it. They exhaust themselves, thinking that if they just try harder, they will finally be seen. But the reality is, you do not need to be seen by everyone. You only need to see yourself clearly, fully, and without apology. This shift is powerful because it changes the way you interpret being ignored. Instead of spiraling into self-doubt, you begin to see it as a filter. His silence is not a reflection of your lack. It is a reflection of his limits. It shows you who is not aligned with the depth of love and respect you are worthy of. And while that can feel painful, it also saves you. It saves you from giving your heart to someone who cannot hold it. It saves you from wasting your life on temporary attention when what you deserve is permanent devotion. When you internalize this, you stop chasing closure in places that can never provide it. You stop waiting for explanations that will not heal you. You stop handing your peace to people who do not know how to protect it. Instead, you choose to give your energy to what builds you, to what elevates you, to what reminds you of your strength. That is how you turn the wound of being ignored into the wisdom of self-respect. Psychology shows us that one of the greatest human needs is significance, the need to feel that we matter. And when someone ignores you, it cuts directly into that need. But significance does not come from others. It comes from within. The more you build your own sense of meaning, the less you rely on someone else to validate it. You create your own significance by living with purpose, by chasing growth, by showing up for yourself every single day. And when you do, no silence can strip you of that. This is where your true transformation begins. You move from needing to be chosen to realizing that you are the one with the power to choose. You can choose who has access to your heart. You can choose where you invest your energy. You can choose whether to stay trapped in cycles of doubt or to rise into a life of clarity, confidence, and strength. That choice is always in your hands, and no one's silence can take it away. And the more you stand in that truth, the more magnetic you become, because nothing is more powerful than a person who knows their worth. They do not beg, they do not chase, they do not crumble when ignored. They simply keep rising, keep glowing, keep moving forward. And the world cannot help but notice someone who refuses to dim their light. So let silence be your teacher. Let it remind you that you are more than someone else's attention. Let it push you towards your own recognition, your own strength, your own transformation. Because the moment you truly see yourself, you will never again fear being unseen. When you decide to stop shrinking in the face of silence, you begin to reclaim the one thing you always had but forgot to protect, your voice. Not the voice that begs to be heard by someone else, but the voice inside you that whispers you are enough, exactly as you are. That voice grows louder each time you refuse to chase. It grows stronger each time you walk away from what dishonors you. It becomes unshakable each time you choose peace over desperation. And when you allow that voice to lead, you transform from someone waiting to be valued into someone who radiates undeniable value. The truth is, silence often forces you into a confrontation with yourself. It makes you ask, do I believe in me? Do I trust my worth even when someone else does not acknowledge it? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary, because every time you answer yes, every time you choose to stand tall in the absence of validation, you build a foundation that no rejection can destroy. This is resilience. This is emotional power. This is the kind of strength that turns pain into growth. Studies on human behavior reveal something remarkable. People who practice self-validation live more fulfilled lives. They do not wait for the world to affirm them. They affirm themselves. They understand that external validation is temporary, but internal validation lasts forever. This means you are not at the mercy of his silence unless you choose to be. You can decide right here, right now, that you will no longer depend on anyone else to remind you of your worth. You will remind yourself every day until it becomes unshakable truth. And when you live from that place, something shifts. You no longer tolerate half effort. You no longer settle for someone who only shows up when it is convenient. You no longer confuse crumbs of attention with the fullness of love, because you know now that love is not silent. Love is not absent. Love does not ignore. Love sees you, respects you, and shows up consistently. Anything less is not love. It is a distraction, and you deserve more than distractions. You deserve devotion. This is why silence is not your enemy. It is your guide. It points you toward the places where your standards must rise. It forces you to stop clinging to illusions and start demanding reality. It teaches you that attention is cheap, but respect is priceless. And the moment you embrace that lesson, you stop fearing silence and start using it as a filter. You let it separate the ones who cannot rise to meet you from the ones who will. Every time you choose yourself in the face of being ignored, you elevate your life. You expand your confidence. You strengthen your spirit. You prepare yourself for the kind of love and opportunities that align with your true worth. And the beauty of this transformation is that once you step into it, you never go back. You never again beg for attention. You never again settle for silence. You never again forget who you are, because you are not defined by who ignores you. You are defined by how powerfully you rise when they do. And nothing is more magnetic, more unstoppable, more undeniable than a person who refuses to let silence diminish their light.